Welcome into Fielding the 68, brought to you by Rhythm. Nice to be here today with you guys. Thanks for making us a very small part of your Friday afternoon. I'm John Martin, joined today by the experts, Lukas, Harkins, Rocco Miller. For the first time this season, we are going to reveal our top 16 teams in the field. So top 4 in each region we're going to get to here in just a little bit. Fellas, good to be with you as always. So the way this works, they tell me that every March there is a tournament and 68 teams play in it, and they have to determine seeds, and it's based on who you beat and who you lose to, stuff like that. I don't know. But our job is to figure out exactly where those teams fall. And before we get to the region reveals, Rocco, I want to start with protected seeds and the concept of protected seeds and why they're important. So just help us sort of break down why a team would want to have a protected seed and their significance, come tournament time.
Yeah, so protected seed is the top 16, which we're about to reveal. It covers the 1, the 2s, the 3s, and the 4 seeds. And from a pure logistical standpoint, it protects them from playing against a team, a Cinderella team, that's located within 75 miles of that arena. So there is a protection element to it, to where, let's say you are a team like Duke, and you get sent all the way to Spokane, you will not have to worry about playing Eastern Washington, because Eastern Washington is within 75 miles of that arena. So that's a great example. And so really what it allows for is, at the very worst, if you're a protected seed, you're still going to play in an arena where it's a true neutral venue per se. Doesn't mean you're necessarily closer to that arena than your opponent, but it protects you in that regard. You won't have to be at a geographical disadvantage until at the earliest, the second round. The other advantage to it is you have all the different ways they bracket. So when you're in the protected seed range, let's say there's 4 teams from the SEC. All 4 of them are required to go to 4 different regions. If one of those 4 were to fall to a 5 seed, they wouldn't be protected, and they could actually be in the same seed, same region as like a Tennessee or an Alabama. So
Yep.
There's a lot of different caveats. There's almost a fence around these top 16. Then we kind of let things break loose, or the rules allow things to break loose once we start hitting the 5 seeds. So it's a big deal to get into this top 16 just from all the different bracketing policies and procedures.
We're also later in the show going to get into, because on some level, right, we know who in a range who the top 16 teams are. You may disagree on where a team fits. Where the discourse really gets interesting is who's on the bubble, who should be in, who should be out. And Dagan told me that if you guys disagree, you have to handle it like men and go outside the back. You got to handle it physically. So that's that was from Dagan. So just be prepared for that. If it comes to it, Lukas, are you prepared to handle it like men with Rocco?
I'm going to need to get a flight down to Boca if that's going to be the case. If we're going to have a fight anyway, I'd rather it be on the beach than the snow I'm working with.
Right, but that would sort of make Rocco a protected seed in that instance, right? I mean, he's sort of at home, he's got the advantage. So I don't know, but at any rate, we'll do that a little bit later in the show. So without further ado, boys, if you want to get into it, let's start with the Midwest region. The top 4 teams in the Midwest region are as follows. Number 1 overall seed, Purdue, Boilermakers. We've got the Kansas Jayhawks as the 2, the Auburn Tigers as the 3, and then Clemson Tigers as the 4. Obviously, you see Purdue is the number 1 overall seed. Clemson there is the last 4. But let's talk a little bit, Lukas, about the Kansas Jayhawks. They have sort of hit a little bit of a skid here. You have them on the 2 seed here. How do you assess? Is it injuries? Okay, they don't have McCullough, and you just sort of ascribe the struggles to that. Just sort of, how do you see this Kansas Jayhawks team given what they've gone through recently?
Yeah, I think first things first, the 2 seed is still a top 8 team in the country. It's a really good spot to be in. I mean, if you're a step behind the 1 seed line that Kansas has been so familiar with. And I think a 2 right now is probably where they're going to be when the committee releases their top 16 tomorrow. But with that said, I mean, a relatively poor road record could lead them down to a 3-seed line, but still 9-5 against the upper two quadrants. They have 5 wins in Quad 1A, really good resume metrics. I think this is a team that stays on the 2 when it gets down to the top 16 from the committee tomorrow. There's just too many positives here, even with those negatives.
Rocco, Auburn was a team that there was, I remember having arguments, a couple of weeks ago about them. Their metrics are good, but their strength of schedule and the wins they had piled up was certainly in question. But I think when you just take them as what they are and you see what they just recently did to, a top 11 ranked South Carolina team, got Kentucky coming up this weekend, you see what they're capable of. On the 3 line right now, my question is, how much upside is there with this Auburn team? Just a couple more ranked opportunities here on Saturday against Kentucky at home and then at Tennessee. Can they move up materially, or do you think this is sort of the range where they can expect to be?
Yeah, I think there's 2 different versions of Auburn. I think there's the Auburn that plays in Neville Arena and absolutely destroys, obliterates everybody. They've played 6 SEC games there. 4 of those 6 are against NCAA tournament level teams. They've won all 6 of their SEC games by double digits. They just beat South Carolina by 40. When Auburn goes and plays in other arenas, they're a lot more human. And that's why they're 2-4 in their 6 toughest road games. And that's why they're not a top 2 seed right now. However, the performance in Neville Arena, and they've got a couple other good wins. They've won at Ole Miss. I'm not knocking, all the things they've done away from Auburn, but they have a lot to prove still. So I think that opportunity at Tennessee represents a lot because performance-wise, they're about a top 5 or 6 team. But I think the whole body of work represents closer to where we have them, which is 11th overall. And that's where they can start to, shrink that gap. If they can show us a couple more things on the road. And ultimately, when they play in the NCAA tournament, they're not going to be able to play any games at home, of course, either. There's no sites closer to Alabama than Memphis, so that's really not that big of an advantage, even if they can get into Memphis. So Auburn's going to have to figure out how to get some good wins away from home. If they can win that Tennessee game, if they can continue playing at this level, they got a shot to get to the 2. And who knows, if everything breaks right and they get some help, they might sniff the 1 line.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Purdue is pretty obvious to everybody watching why they would be the number 1 overall seed. So unless you guys have any superlatives, any additional love letters here in the month of February you'd like to write, I'd like to sort of discuss Clemson a bit, because it just feels like a month ago, we were questioning, okay, are they even going to, be able to make it in? And now they're on the 4 line. So Lukas, is this in a year where everybody seems to be so down on the ACC? It feels like this is sort of a nod to that league with Clemson being on the 4 seed.
Yeah, maybe part of it. I think more than anything is, as much as people have been down on the ACC, one team they have not been down on is North Carolina. And Clemson has a road win at North Carolina, has a road win at Alabama. And those 2 wins inside of themselves, combined with, a neutral site win over TCU, a away win over Pitt that's gained traction in recent weeks, I think that they put themselves in a position to be around the 4 line. I currently have Clemson as a 5. I put them a little bit behind the rest of the group because I think their quality metrics, 23rd in BPI, 28th in KenPom, lag behind a couple of those teams that are also in the mix, like a Dayton or a Creighton, that are also there. But I think Clemson's certainly in the mix there. They have 2 of the best road wins in the country. They're 9-6 against the upper 2 quadrants. To hear their name called by the committee in the top 16 tomorrow would not be a surprise. And I think at worst they're a 5 seed right now.
Yeah, just real quick before we get to the East region here, if you've got them as a 5, and this is sort of a consensus, Rocco, I would assume you have them a bit higher. So what is it about Clemson that has you a bit higher here than Lukas?
Yeah, I mean, this was actually, to me, the toughest decision out of the whole top 16. Who was going to get that last 16 spot? I thought, we might have different orders, 1 through 15. It just happened to be that next group of teams started with 16 through 20 or so, at least in my opinion. So it was really just this last 4 seed all the way through all the 5 seeds. And they all kind of deserve consideration, whether you look at Clemson, Dayton, Creighton, South Carolina, maybe even a Texas Tech or San Diego State. And I just think, what I do, like I always do, is go off the learnings of previous years. We have 9 of the same 12 committee members this year as last year. And I think you need a nice blend of resume and performance. And I think Clemson represents that. of course, you can't top the 2 road wins at Alabama and at North Carolina. A supplemental win that is very nice is a win in Canada over TCU. So that's 3 really strong wins. And when you look at like a Creighton, they've only got a road win at Nebraska. They haven't got which is a good win. It's a tournament team, but not as strong as Alabama or Carolina. Maybe not even as strong as TCU. So I thought that comparison was fairly well in Clemson's favor. And then you got Dayton, who is a kind of a mystery team, and that's the team I'm more curious what the committee will do. It's kind of they're tougher to predict because they don't get the same opportunities. Their big wins were Cincinnati and St. John's. Over the last couple of weeks, both Cincinnati and St. John's have played their way out of the field. Not Dayton's fault, but just part of bracketology. And Dayton themselves, of course, lost to VCU last Friday, taking a second loss in their own league. So they're not as shiny and glitzy as they were a couple weeks ago either. But they're right there to be picked. It's just a very different body of work than Clemson. And so we have to, that's where I kind of drew straws and went with the Tigers.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, on to the East region as we make our way down our top 16 here on Field in the 68. UConn Huskies, number 1 seed there in the East. Tennessee, number 2. Iowa State, number 3. Illini, number 4. Lukas, I'm interested in UConn because they've just sort of picked up exactly where they left off last season, just been utterly dominant when they have their full roster. I'm going to present it to you like this. If Purdue wins out and UConn wins out, is there any chance UConn could jump Purdue? Or if nothing changes, this is just what the order is going to be?
Yeah, I think there's a chance there. I think Purdue has a relatively decent leg up right now in the fact that it's has 7 quad 1A wins, which UConn doesn't. But what UConn has left on its schedule is both matchups with Marquette. Starting off this weekend, they get Marquette at home, and I think that's where they could grow an edge if they were able to sweep Marquette along that path. Whereas I think Purdue only gets Illinois once during the stretch. So I think UConn can get there. All their games are really tough down the stretch. They still get at Creighton. They get Marquette twice. They go at Providence. I think all of their remaining games, all 6, are against teams that are still in the conversation, at least for bids. Which isn't the case for Purdue. So I think there's a chance for UConn to get there. And certainly those are the 2, 1 and 2 seed. Number 1 and 2 on the 1 line, and I don't think it's close right now.
Tennessee, they're at the 2 seed here. A couple, actually 4 more ranked opportunities for the Volunteers. They host Auburn, they go to Bama, they go to South Carolina, and they host Kentucky. So, Rocco, it feels like, as the 6 overall here, the Vols are going to be able to play themselves onto the 1 line if they, go 3-1. I mean, what's the upshot here for the Volunteers?
They might be able to do it with a perfect record. 3-1 would be really interesting. It would depend on who that one loss was against, and just going off the very easy, simple grid right now. Arizona's the 4th number 1, I believe. That's where we had them on Monday. They haven't played since, so I'm assuming we're still sitting in that same position. But Arizona will not have the opportunities that you just listed Tennessee has. So there is this predicament here for the Wildcats where they could get passed up by a team like Tennessee. They could just win their way to a more impressive resume, and there's really nothing Arizona can do about it. So that is a fascinating element. I agree with that if they go 4-0. Again, 3-1, I'm not sure because we have to wait that out. We're looking at a situation today where Tennessee is 14-6 in meaningful games, and Arizona 16-5 in meaningful games. So if Arizona doesn't do anything wrong, that would give Tennessee 2 more losses than Arizona. So that's a tough one to sell, but you could sell it still if they have an abundance of great wins, particularly on the road. They win those 2 big road games at Bama, at South Carolina. That might be enough.
Iowa State there on the 3 line, Lukas. I just wonder, are Cyclones fans going to feel a little slighted by that? Because the rap is they can't win away from home. They've done that in Big 12 play. Again, they have a lot of opportunities coming up. So I think that's always what you want. I mean, you've got more opportunities to prove yourself if you're Iowa State. But what went into the 3 line here for them?
Yeah, I think Iowa State's correctly the 9th on our seed list. That's where I have Iowa State right now, is 9th on the seed list. I think they were really in consideration for me for the last 2 seed with Kansas, and I ended up going with Kansas in that regard, partially because Iowa State played one of the worst non-conference schedules of the teams in the top 16, 322nd in non-conference strength of schedule, and obviously that was part of them being able to bolster their quality metrics to the point that they're at, is they dominated those games, like just dominated those games. But the fact that schedule is still there, I think, holds them back just a touch right now. But I think that they're definitely a team that can play their way up to the 2 line. And I wouldn't be that surprised if even they got the call to be a 2 seed tomorrow. I think they're somewhere between 8 and 10, and I think 9 is the right spot.
And then, Rocco, finally, before we get to the second half of the reveal here on Field in the 68, just your thoughts on Illinois and their resume and why they're checking in here at the 4.
Yeah, I think Illinois across the board really, besides the home loss to Maryland, hasn't done too much wrong. They, of course, had the Terrence Shannon saga come and go, but the body of work suggests that shouldn't really be factored in because they have him now and they'll have him for the foreseeable future. So, some of the knocks on Illinois is they're 3 and 5 in quad 1 opportunities. So that's less than 500. I think that's keeping them away from being as high as a 3 seed. But they're, all their other records and a win over Florida Atlantic away from home on top of 3 really strong home wins against teams that are going to be in the field show enough evidence that they belong in this protected seed area. So it does seem like 4 seed seems correct. And I think we got them right exactly where I had them. So
awesome. Well, we got another half. Go ahead, Lukas. Sorry.
I had nothing.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought you had another point. Yeah, we got another half of the bracket to reveal. Going to get to the South region and the West region. When we get back, you're watching Fielding the 68 right here on the Field 68 Media Network. Back after this.
As you guys know by now, we've partnered with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers of the Field of 68 as we all get ready for the best month of the year, March Madness. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, you can use the bonus code FIELD150 and you will get $150 in free bets on your first wager with BetMGM, regardless of whether or not you win that first bet. Here's the best part. All you need to do is deposit and bet $5 of your hard-earned money. This is how you make it work. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code FIELD150. That's FIELD150. Deposit at least $5 and place your first wager on any game. You will receive up to $150 in bonus bets regardless of the outcome of your bet. Just make sure you use that bonus code FIELD150 when you sign up. And remember, BetMGM is now available in one wallet in select states. As a New Jersey resident, this is super convenient when I have to go cover games in Philly or New York, which happens quite a bit. When you cross state borders, you just log into your existing account and fire away. You don't have to create a new account in each state. It's easy, it's simple, and it's clean. And most importantly, we have some fun stuff coming up for the conference tournaments and for the NCAA tournament. Bet insurance tokens, college hoops odds boost, and my personal favorite, a nice little parlay boost here and there. So download the BetMGM app and sign up today.
All right, welcome back to Field in the 68, brought to you by Rhythm. Appreciate you guys making us a small part of your Friday afternoon, getting closer and closer every weekend to that NCAA tournament. So, I mean, this is when we're starting to get a real clear picture, of who goes where. We've already revealed our top 4 seeds in the Midwest region. We've already revealed our top 4 seeds in the East region. That leaves us 2 remaining. Let's get it going with the Dirty South. In the South region, we've got Houston as the number 1 overall seed in that region, North Carolina as the 2, Alabama at the 3, and then Wisconsin as the 4 spot. As it relates to Houston, Lukas, just break this team down. I mean, Kelvin Sampson, obviously, as consistent as they come, moving to the Big 12. They've mostly, it feels like, maximized those chances. What do you make of these Cougars and their resume?
Number 1 in BPI, number 1 in KenPom, number 1 in the net. Those things just add up to being a 1 seed. They do. In just a pure metric standpoint, they're also 9-3 against the upper two quadrants, and 8 of those wins are in quad one. I think they're pretty safely on the one side. As I mentioned earlier, I do think they're a step behind that Purdue UConn 1 and 2 on the one line, but I think they're definitely the third best one seed and pretty safely in that position.
Yeah. North Carolina, interesting. And Rocco, who knows if it's just a scheduling quirk, after you handle Duke at home, but it has been, a little bit of a grind, since then here at the 2 spot. How confident sort of are you that they maintain this spot? Just give me your thoughts on the Tar Heels and all that goes into, the Duke win, but then sort of the struggles since then. Close win against Miami and obviously the loss at Syracuse.
Yeah, I mean, recent play suggests that none of us should be confident they can stay. They're here because of damage they did weeks prior and the rest of the season earlier. Getting that road win at Clemson has really aged so well. Now that we know Clemson is a team in the top 16, you have a neutral court win over Oklahoma that stands out away from home. And in general, out of all these teams at the top of the board, even to this day, in top competition on the road, they've had 7 games in the top 2 quads away, and they're 6-1. They're the only team, unless you go all the way down to St. Mary's, who's not in the protected seed range, I don't believe. They're the only team with only 1 loss. So they've done a lot of great road damage. The committee loves that. That's saving them right now. But I think if this type of play continues, you're dropping games at Syracuse, you're dropping home games. Obviously, they're in a position now where they can finally really fall. In fact, going into the exercise today, John, I went into it, as I always do, open-minded, and I thought there was a chance they could easily land on the 3, but the teams trying to catch them just haven't done enough yet.
I'm really intrigued by the 3 here in Alabama. They obviously are first place standalone in the SEC, but Lukas, when I look at their resume, it just, to me, it feels like there's just that win that's missing. Yes, they beat Auburn, and it was a great win, no question, but it was there. And I sort of look around, and I'm like, what else do you really have? So how strong are they on the 3 line? How much of it is just they're leading the SEC right now? Just what's going into the Crimson Tide being where they are in the field right now?
Yeah. So for those 2 questions, in terms of, I think they're pretty solidly on the 3 as of right now, and that's how all bracketology is a snapshot of where things stand. And I think they're definitely a step ahead of the teams on the 4. I have them pretty solidly on the 3 at this moment. But as to your second question of is it just leading the SEC, it has nothing really to do with that. I think obviously that plays a factor in in how they've gotten here, because the non-conference was tough sledding, 8-5 in non-con, with some tough losses in there, and their only really big non-conference win, which has aged really well, is Indiana State. But other than that, it's really been just intra-conference play that's put them to here. But one thing that you can say about their slow start is that it was a slow start, but one with great metrics still. And those metrics have maintained as they started to win those games. And it's kind of been – Alabama's kind of been a case of let the quality metrics speak for themselves over time. If a Ken Palmer or a BPI believes you this much, the longer the more games you play, the more things are going to trend in that direction. They're 6th in BPI, 7th in Ken Palm, and now they've trended themselves up to that kind of level in terms of seeding now that they've gotten there.
Yeah, just a follow-up real quick, Lukas, like metrics good, all that. How much room do they sort of have to spare? Like if they took a loss to Texas A&M, for example, at home, like how punitive would that be? I'm just trying to get a feel and a gauge for just how much room they have here. How punitive might a loss to an unranked A&M team, an unranked Florida team, like what kind of space are we talking about with them?
Yeah, I think there's definitely more room to drop than there is to rise. You pointed out they don't have really that great road win. Their best win is at home against Auburn by 4 points. And they're not really going to have a chance to pick one of those up either. You look at their remaining schedule at Kentucky, great road win, but doesn't do a ton in terms of like an elite road win. Same with that at Ole Miss and same with at Florida. So I think there's definitely a better likelihood that they fall off the 3 than they raise to a 2. But I think they're in pretty good shape for a protected seed come next month, because those metrics are so outstanding, and I don't see them dropping outside of the top 10.
Yeah, and then finally here at the 4, Rocco, we have the Wisconsin Badgers, who were in free fall before the win over Ohio State that ultimately got Chris Holtmann up out of there. Is this more like, because it's like, a month ago we were talking about Wisconsin. I don't know if we were talking about them credibly, but it was at least a discussion that was being had that they could be a 1. And we go from that to the 4. Is that sort of what this is about, more so like where they were and maybe could have been to the spot that they've ultimately fallen to given their recent play?
I think it's just, you have to reassess every time a new result comes in, but it's only as important as many games as they've played, right? So it's a constantly growing pie of sample sizes. And obviously the recent sample sizes, besides that latest win by Wisconsin, have not been good. But you got to weigh that all together. And that's why we're always talking about body of work. And, much to my surprise, at least on Monday, they were still measuring out as a 4 seed then, and then they got another win this week to, I think, further, solidify themselves as a 4 seed. But in general, you can't take away the win at Michigan State. You can't take away the win on a neutral court against Virginia. You can't take away the 6 quad 1 wins. Those are all there to stay. But then, you start piling up losses. You start getting losing records in some of these different key categories, whether it's quad 1 opportunities or road games. And by the way, Wisconsin's 5-6 away neutral. So that is working against them now. And they're 3-6 in their 9 really important road games. So they have a lot more to prove still. And they were in a much better position before, but they're still, again, we're just, everything's a beauty pageant, John. We're just comparing teams. And they still look a little bit prettier than the 5 seeds.
Yeah, like I guess that's an interesting sort of follow up. If you were on the committee, right? Like I've got a November and a December. Just generally, let's just say hypothetically, I've got a Wisconsin, a November and a December that was fantastic, elite, piling up quad 1 wins left and right. But then I've got a January once we get the conference play and they've lost 4 of 5. Like, how do you sort of weight that, right, Rocco? Like, how do you? Because like is 1 month more telling than the other? I just, that's the piece of it that I would sort of wonder as a fan. Like, should January matter more than November? I don't necessarily agree with that. How do you sort of weigh that?
Yeah, so by the book, there is no difference. Every month is equally as important. And in fact, you could easily argue that the least important is championship week, because the committee starts their process during that week. And if you don't get your results in by Thursday or Friday, they're probably not going to factor into the bracket unless you're stealing a bid. So every other part of the season is looked at equal. The net is actually created to sort the data. It's not necessarily to focus on quad 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. It's to give the committee a resource to filter all these results. So it doesn't matter if that game happened in November, because sometimes, John, what happens is you could beat a team that you thought was ranked 100 in November. They could go on later in the year and turn into a top 30 team, and you go from what you thought was a quad 3 win, it turns into a quad 1. It could go the other way, right? So you just don't know. What you do is you play your game, and then whoever you play against, you root for them the rest of the year. And so that's just kind of the overall answer there.
Yeah, you're when you're scheduling games in the non-conference, you're almost trying to bet a little bit on, okay, this team's going to do X, Y, and Z. By the time they get to their league play, and you just hope. Yep,
it's a dartboard. Sometimes
you
you're in a triple 20. Sometimes you miss a little bit and you land on a 20.
That's right. All right. Last and final region reveal here on Fielding the 68 on the February 16th edition of the show. Arizona is the last 1 seed. Marquette as the 2, Baylor 3, and then the Duke Blue Devils as the 4. Obviously, a couple things here. Arizona is that last number 1. Marquette is the first number 2. Let's talk a little Marquette, Lukas, because as that first number 2, it feels like with 2 matchups against UConn, Shaka Smart's bunch could have some room to head up here.
Yeah, I agree. Now, before I get into Marquette, I first want to just, this region being bold letter followed by a letter U, and then a bold letter logo looks fantastic. Just a quick observation. But on Marquette, you're right. I mean, they've won 8. They've won 8 in a row. They've got 2 over Villanova in that stretch. They beat Seton Hall. They beat St. John's twice. They got a win at Butler. They still get both games against UConn, and one that I think kind of keeps going underrated, both now, which we've talked about with UConn and with Marquette now, is they go at Creighton still too. Like there's opportunities to build there. Marquette's put itself into position, I think, to be in contention for a 1. They're 10-5 across the upper 2 quadrants. 4 of those wins are in quad 1A. The metrics are just a touch behind those other teams in contention for a 1 seed right now. The team's currently on the 1. But I think, as we pointed out with Tennessee earlier, is that Arizona doesn't really have those opportunities down the stretch. And they could be leaped by a team like Tennessee. And as we speak, as a team like Tennessee, Marquette qualifies as a like in terms of what they have remaining and what they've put up together.
Yeah, on Arizona, Rocco. I mean, obviously, you look at what they have done, and they played an absolute monster of a schedule, and so they get credit for that, no question about it. But is it a deal where, like, even if they lost 1 game the rest of the way, and that loss was at UCLA, like they're coming off the 1 line? Is it really like is it that narrow for them?
It can be, yeah. Just again, it just depends on what the teams chasing them do. If they perform, they can pass them. And even a team like we talked about before, Tennessee, Marquette as well, who's in this region that we just talked about. They have the schedule to pass probably Arizona if in this perfect storm, all 3 teams won the rest of their games. They probably have such enough ammo in their schedule to perhaps pass Arizona without any help. But I do think, if Arizona loses to anybody left on their Pac-12 schedule, chances are it's going to hurt pretty bad. Right now, the second best team in the league is Washington State, who is somewhere around an 8 to 10 seed, depending on where everybody has them. I had them as an 8 today, but again, they're not. I think they play them one more time, but it's a home game, so they can't really even take that loss. So Arizona, on paper, would be taking a hit no matter which game they lost going forward.
Baylor feels right. I mean, I feel like they're exactly probably where they should be. Lukas, what about Duke and their maneuverability as a 4? What's it look like for them?
Yeah, I think one thing that works against Duke right now is a below 500 record in quad 2. They're 1-2 in quad 2 games, and if you want to separate things out, like and compare teams quadrant by quadrant, that's something that they're going to lose most of the time. Against teams in these top 5 or 6 seed lines. So I think that holds them back right now. But I think that in general, 5 of their wins being in quad 1, 2 are quad 1A games. They have pretty solid metrics. I think it's a group that's pretty solidly on the 4, but one that I don't feel very confident being even consideration for a 3 or necessarily down to a 5. I think that they're kind of, as Rocco discussed with Illinois earlier, I think they're pretty solidly on that 4 spot.
Yeah, at Miami, at Wake, 2 home games against Virginia and Duke. North Carolina. So chances are definitely going to be there for the Blue Devils. All right, as we have just revealed our top 16 teams, we're now going to get into, when we get back, the last 4 in, and what comes with that, of course, the first 4 out. So we're going to do all of that and more when we get back. You're watching the Fielding the 68 on the Field of 68 Media Network. Back after this.
There is nothing in sports better than the heart of the college basketball season, which is why I need to tell you guys about our partners over at Rhythm. If you're into sports betting, you need Rhythm, the place for data-backed props and picks. For those that are unfamiliar, Rhythm, spelled RITHMM, is the go-to mobile app for player props and game picks. Backed by AI predictive models, Rhythm helps you make smarter and faster betting decisions across all sports, but particularly college hoops, where there are as many as 150 games a day during conference play, many of which have softer lines at BetMGM than you'll find in the NFL or the NBA. With Rhythm, you get data-backed picks for every Division I game every day. Users get free picks daily with the ability to upgrade to unlimited access. And for those of you already using modeling, you can build custom sports betting models within the Rhythm app itself. I am a Rhythm user, and I found that I've been a better when I focus on lines where my gut and Rhythm's modeling are aligned. When I think UConn can cover on the road against Butler and Rhythm backs that up, we fire. But Rhythm also helps lead you to plays that you didn't know you needed to make. Like, for example, when the data says bet the over in UMass Lowell versus New Hampshire because you have a 61% edge on that line, you bet the over and you bink. So if you want to increase your edge and win more bets, go to the link in the description below and download Rhythm today. That's RITHMM, the place for data-backed props and picks.
Welcome back to Fielding the 68 right here on the Field of 68 Media Network. Okay, we have already revealed the top 16 teams in the NCAA tournament, as our experts have it. The West region, the South region, the East, the Midwest. That's the 4 regions that they delegate in the NCAA tournament. So now we're going to turn to the teams that are just barely going to scrape in, and the teams that are going to be sad on the outside looking in come tournament time. Now, we had a consensus for the top 16. In this case, both of you guys may have different answers on these teams. So, Lukas, you're going to start us off. Who are your last 4 teams in?
So I'm leading my last 4 in right now with Gonzaga, Providence, Ole Miss, and Cincinnati. Starting with Gonzaga, I'm not really sure what to think yet of Gonzaga. Of course, you can point to they only have 1 quality win, and that was on the road over a Kentucky team that is kind of trending towards a 7-8 for me, but no bad losses. Strength of records in bubble territory. Quality metrics are fantastic. I'm hedging a little bit with them being my 4th to last team in. I think this is a team that, if they get in, would probably be seeded higher than this. But I think it's because of those quality metrics. But I think it's pretty difficult to say whether they're going to be in the field or not right now. Providence, big wins over Creighton and St. John's recently, even though both were at home. Really big to prove they can pick up those quality wins without Bryce Hopkins. Metrics really bubbly. 4 quad 1 wins is great. But they didn't play a quad 3 games. They're under 500 against the upper 3 quadrants, 9-0 in quad 4, 2-6 in road games. They really scream to be a team sitting on the cut line. Speaking of teams like Gonzaga that are really difficult to figure out right now, good luck figuring out what the committee is going to do with Ole Miss right now. 24th in KPI, 20th in strength of record, but they're sub 60 in every single other metric. They don't have a quad 1A win. They're 4-6 against the upper 2 quadrants, sub 300 in non-conference strength of schedule. There's a lot of negatives with Ole Miss's resume, but as far as where they stand right now, those top 25 resume metrics are going to be really hard to keep out of the field. Cincinnati was my last team in. They were one of 3 teams I was considering for this last spot. We'd get to the other 2 when we get to the first 4 out. But I ended up going with Cincinnati for their 2 quad 1A wins. That's at BYU and at Texas Tech. But just 4-8 against the upper 2 quadrants, 7-9 against the top 3 quadrants. Another one of those teams with a sub 300 non-conference strength of schedule. It's not a position I'd be particularly envious of being this last team in right now. But I do have them just above my first 2 out in that final conversation.
Yeah, on Gonzaga, ultimately, you have to not lose if you're them. But they were definitely a team where there was some back and forth about given what they had or had not done prior to going into Lexington and getting that done. Is it as simple as they beat Kentucky and Lexington? They might have been out before, but now they're in. Is it sort of that? Did that flip it for you?
I think to some extent, I think they absolutely needed to win one of St. Mary's or Kentucky down the stretch. And either one might have put them on the right side of the field for me, and losing both would put them in a position where they'd have a really hard time getting in the field. They got the first one, and I think that puts them right in this cut line conversation. And a lot of the season will hinge on what they do against St. Mary's next, and if they get St. Mary's in the WCC tournament.
Yeah, no question. That was a very impressive win. Not a good day for Kentucky fans, but definitely was for Mark Few. All right, Rocco, let's go to Rocco Miller's last 4 in. See how much of an agreement we can get here on who Rocco's got as the last 4 in.
Yeah, and of course, when we're talking about the last 4 in, John, we're zooming in on one little part of the bracket. There's a much bigger story to tell, but I'll digress. So much like the show on Monday, it starts with Mississippi State and Boise State. Not much change. Mississippi State had the bye this week, so nothing happened to them. And Boise State also had the bye this week. So no games for either team. They're in the exact same position. Didn't expect that. I'm very comfortable with both of those teams getting in. It's just kind of with some of the different nuances of teams like Ole Miss, who are just barely above them for me, Nebraska, barely above them for me. Not much change since Monday, and I didn't see a reason to make the switch. I feel good about putting both of those teams in Dayton, So there they go. And next I have New Mexico. Now, New Mexico, of course, came back from the dead. They had the bad home loss on Saturday last week to UNLV, ended up winning a big road game by 1 point at Nevada. And this is going to touch on a larger theme I think we'll talk about later in the show about how the Mountain West just seems to be threading the needle like no other to keep all 6 of these relevant teams picking up key road wins, beating up on each other to the point where they have enough good wins to keep them selectable, if you will. But also, like, what's going on here? But New Mexico is one that I actually feel pretty good about. If you watch them play, their roster's awesome. They're a dangerous team that could be a second weekend team. And I think when a committee sits down and looks at them and talks about them, they now finally have a road win that they can point to and say, see, they can win on the road. They just did that in Reno. And last but not least, of those 4, I have Seton Hall. And this was more of a precision decision, and not trying to be all punny over here, but my analysis had Nevada as the last team in, I'll be honest. But I just can't see a scenario with the combination of remaining games for all 6 of the Mountain West teams that are legitimately in the hunt right now. No pun again for Nevada being on the hunt. But I just think one of these 6 are going to be left out. And Nevada, I think, is the closest to being left out at this point, taking another home loss. They also have 2 incredibly tricky games on their schedule against their rivals, UNLV. UNLV has been poisoning a lot of success stories in this league, and who else would they want to poison besides the Wolfpack? So I do think Seton Hall, although I don't like the fact that they're 8-9 in meaningful games, I would prefer you to be at least 500 or better. Meaningful games just mean throw out your quad 4 results and show me what's left. At least Seton Hall has the road wins at Butler, who we agree is a tournament team today, and a borderline bubble out, bubble in team in Providence, a team they're directly up against. They exchanged road wins with. So they have 2 road wins to point at. They have the great home wins with UConn and Marquette, who are easily protected seeds, top 5 teams in my opinion, and that's enough reason to put Seton Hall as the very last team in.
Got it. Okay, so let's move on to first 4 out. Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's a consensus. Oh, no, we do have a consensus. Yes. Okay, so here's the consensus of fielding 68's last 4 in before we get to the first 4 out. We've got Gonzaga, Ole Miss, Providence, and Nevada. So there you have it. That is our last 4 in as our consensus right now at fielding the 68. All right, Lukas, who do you have right now as your first 4 out?
Yes, my first 4 out right now are Utah, Wake Forest, the Seton Hall team that Rocco was just talking about, and Villanova. Wow. Utah slid out of the field after its road loss to USC. Recent results aren't weighted any differently, as we discussed earlier in this podcast, but Utah's lost 3 in a row and 5 of 6. They're 1-6 in true road games now. They're outside of the top 60 in strength of record. I think they're just on the outside. Wake Forest trails just behind. They were that 3rd team that I was in consideration with, this last team, along with Cincinnati and Utah. Margins are razor thin. I gave Utah the edge for first team out over Wake Forest because of a head-to-head win. Wake's still without a quad 1 win this year. 5-8 against the top 2 quadrants. Great quality metrics. I think mean that if Wake was to get in the field, they'd get a higher seed than perhaps one that's in Dayton. But I think that they're certainly right around the cut line. Seton Hall, Rocco already talked about, but I'll say I have them on the outside. Sub 65 quality and resume metrics. Sub 250 non-conference. Strength of schedule, 2 quad 3 losses has them looking on the outside. Looking from the outside for me. Villanova, 13-11. That's really it. They're going to have to pick up some wins to get there. They have great wins over Texas Tech and North Carolina. They plus one of the only 2 teams in the country, along with Butler, to win at Creighton this year. That's only one of their 2 road wins on the year, though. 2-6, sub 60 in resume metrics, 3 quad 3 losses. Villanova has work to do, but I think it has given itself a baseline with those quality metrics and those top tier wins to stay in the mix. Although I think there is a pretty big gap right now between my 3rd team out and the rest of the teams in the bubble.
Got it. All right, Rocco. We just got Lucas's first 4 out. Who's Rocco Miller's first 4 out on February 16th, 2024?
Yeah, so we'll start with Nevada, who I broke down just a minute ago. I think they have the goods to be selected. It's just really this Mountain West puzzle really not a scenario where all 6 can get to the end of the string. And I mean, again, they could keep beating each other over and over again, and maybe it will work. But I can't see a combination where all 6 get in. At least, I don't think that's likely. And unfortunately, I'll just project Nevada to be out. But no offense, Nevada fans, I love what you've done overall. You also have Memphis. I think I have Memphis there because the rest of their schedule is the whole world's still in front of them. They play Florida Atlantic twice still. They go to SMU tomorrow. SMU's a top 40 team in terms of the net. Not a tournament team, but it's a really good road win if Memphis can get it. The AAC did a tremendous job of scheduling top 7 heavy. You play everybody twice in the top 7 projected, and you only play teams in the bottom 7 once. So Memphis' remaining schedule is loaded. If they play well, even though they lost last night, not a bad loss at North Texas, I think they'll have the goods to get selected. So they're right there. And then I think Utah's there for the reasons Lukas just alluded to. Just unfortunately got a cold streak here after the triple OT loss to Arizona that I was at last week. And last but not least, James Madison's creeping back up. They're my 4th to last team out, mainly because Michigan State is their big anchor. Michigan State keeps playing better. That helps James Madison a lot. And otherwise, we don't know a lot about James Madison because they have 16 games against Quad 4 where they're 16-0. But against everybody else, they're 6-3. So, we're kind of depending on some metrics from there, which is weird. I don't like that. But that's just where it's up to the committee's discretion. And guess what, John? The Sun Belt commissioner is on the committee. So James Madison's not going away in the conversation if they're in this position. Again, probably takes a perfect storm, lose to App State in the championship game. They'll still be here. But that Michigan State win on the road keeps them in the conversation.
Yeah, I want to follow up real quick. Memphis is such an interesting case study because, they handled their business in the non-conference and picked up quad 1 wins at A&M, against Clemson, against Virginia. Obviously some didn't age as well as they hoped so, Michigan or Arkansas, for example, but the bottom, it feels like, has really fallen out on them. Do you think there's a chance maybe you're a touch higher on Memphis than, the rest of the country? Like, because you have them second team out, which I think is higher than I've seen them most other. I'm just curious as to, your thinking there.
Yeah, so 2 trains of thoughts there. So first is, for me, you're either in the field or you're out of the field. I don't care if you're 20th team out or first team out. You're either going to the NIT or you're going to the NCAAs. So I don't look at it like that. So from there, you got to look at who's got the ability to play their way in. Maybe a few teams in the power conferences. I should take that back. But Memphis has a great remaining schedule to kind of show us if they belong or not. And right now, I agree, they belong out. The bad outweighs the good, as I've said on a few of these shows before. Can't take 4 bad losses like they have right now and try to make up for that with the 3 great wins they have. Only one of those is on the road at Texas A&M. But I think that road win at VCU is starting to matter more and more. VCU's getting hot. Clemson is, they're playing well. So again, they're sitting around, and they're going to define it themselves with the way they play down the stretch. So why not keep them kind of right on the edge? That's my philosophy on it.
Got it. All right. And what's our consensus here on fielding the 68 on the first 4 out? Seton Hall, Cincinnati, Utah, Wake Forest. That is the fielding the 68's consensus, first 4 out. All right. We're going to come back, and we do have a Mountain West special tonight. I do kind of love how the Mountain West is putting like good games on Friday nights in a night that the sport seemingly has punted. We've got one of those tonight. We'll get into that and the rest of the league when we get back. You're watching Fielding the 68. Back after this.
Big news, guys. I am thrilled to announce that we have partnered with Autograph, a company founded by the GOAT himself, Tom Brady. The Autograph fandom app gives you access to the best college hoops content, fan contests, and exclusive rewards like discounted tickets, all for doing the things that diehard fans like you already do, following your favorite team in the news and listening to podcasts just like this one. When Tom, and yes, I am calling him Tom, we're on a first-name basis these days, co-founded Autograph, he had one mission in mind: change the fan experience for the better. It works like this. You get all of your college hoops content you want in one place. You get articles from your favorite writers, pods from your favorite hosts, contests from your favorite creators, all on the feeds and the sites that you already enjoy. But instead of having to go to all these different places, it all comes to you in one spot, the Autograph Fandom app. But here's the best part. The more content that you consume, the higher you rank in the app. As you consider the level up in status on the app, you can unlock unique rewards curated exclusively for you. So download the free Autograph app in the App Store and use the referral code F68, that's F68, or tap in at the link in the description below or in the podcast app of your choosing to start earning points for doing something as normal as listening to this very podcast. It really is that simple.
Welcome back to Fielding the 68 here on the Field of 68 Media Network. I'm John Martin. He's Lukas Harkins. Rocco Miller's with us as well. I've kind of gotten into a nice routine here of just sitting around Friday night, late night, football's done, and I know I'm going to have a good Mountain West game on. I kind of appreciate that, right? Like, I'm like, hey, tonight, for example, it's going to be New Mexico at San Diego State. Like, that's going to be a great game. Rocco, my question is, do you expect the Mountain West, it's been a great league this year, do you expect it to get the respect on Selection Sunday that it deserves?
I do. It's a matter of an opinion, though. Like, if I would have told you at the start of the year they're getting 5 teams in, I think even if I told the league commissioner that, Gloria, I know Gloria, she would have gave me a hug. And I think the crazy thing is 6 teams have actually put themselves in position. But it's only an 11-team league, and we've got some teams with 6 games left. A couple don't have a bye left, so they'll have 7. And so I just think the combination of games, all of these teams, and especially the 3 to focus on are Nevada, New Mexico, and Boise. They're all right near the bubble. For me, 2 of the last 4 in. Somebody I would imagine is going to go cold. But every time somebody goes cold, like last week it was New Mexico, they turn around and win a road game at Nevada, and they're right back in. Nevada was out. They go to Utah State and win. And then they beat San Diego State. So you just don't know. And like I said earlier, UNLV is just like the crazy wild card that just keeps knocking teams off. They won at Boise. They've knocked off some others. So I think there's just so much to be decided. I just think you got to play the percentages. Percentages say they're only going to get 5. There's probably some sort of crazy formula that gets them 6, and they also need help from other leagues. You also need the bid steal conversation is going to be huge for that. How many bids are going to get stolen? Are there going to be spots for all 6 of these? So I just think at the end of the day, 5 seems really comfortable to me.
And then going around here really quickly, hitting some other ones. Lukas, Michigan State, I assume just based on what they've done, felt like a huge win against Illinois over the weekend. Safely in, any reason to believe otherwise?
No, actually, Michigan State shocked me when I went through my recent update. I put Michigan State on the 6 line, and I don't really know if I believe it, even though I did it. I think there's definitely a gap there between them on a 6 and my other 6s, and certainly a gap between them and the 5 line. But now they've raised their metrics into the low 30s, 4 quad 1 wins. They have great quality metrics, which are going to boost their seeding. I give them the slight edge over some of those teams that are a little bit less proven against quality teams. So I think Michigan State's in pretty good shape, and I'm really surprising myself with where I put them today.
Yeah. And then finally here, Rocco, on the quick hitters, Indiana State feels like one of those teams that, man, it's like, is there a way they get left out? It feels like it's pain, as great as they are offensively, but when you play in the league that they are in and you are in that sandbox, your margin for error is basically 0, right? Like, how do you make sense of Indiana State right now?
Yeah, I mean, that was a brutal loss to Illinois State at home, and definitely altered things. I still have them in as an 11 seed, not too far away from going to the first 4. My gut said they would be one of the last 4 in today. They ended up about the 6th team in on mine.
Tough.
But, they do have an 11-3 record away from home. Their overall strength of resume is a top 29 resume. There's too many reasons to leave them in today. But that, again, is a sliding scale. Like, other resumes below them could get better without them being able to control that. And, the nice thing for them is Drake and Bradley continue to play pretty well. They could play. They won't play either of them in the regular season, but of course, chance they could play one or both in the Arch Madness. So right now, there's still a tiny bit of cushion, but not much. And I agree with you. It'd be tragic if they were in the situation and didn't get in.
Oh, that would really hurt my soul. That would really hurt my soul if I'm the Indiana State coach. I'm like, what do you want me to do? We're 23 in the damn country. Lukas Harkins has me out. I'd have to just come find you, man. All right, it's Friday night. We got a big slate on Saturday. Say again?
I wouldn't do that to Coach Shirts yet.
Yeah. No, he perfect. That'll be music to his ears. It's a big Saturday, as it always is in college basketball. So I'm going to ask you guys the same question. Who stands to gain the most from a positive result this weekend? We'll start with you, Lukas.
I think there's a few here. I think we've discussed some of them already, and that's like Nevada goes at UNLV. That's a game that could really hurt them, but one they can pick up. In terms of area to gain, Wake Forest goes at Virginia. Wake doesn't have a quad one win yet this year. That's an opportunity for one. Marquette at UConn. Marquette's going to really make a push for a 1 seed. That's a game that they could really use. And Creighton at Butler. Butler's a game. This is a big swing game for Butler. They get two on the road after this one. A win over Creighton could give them some much-needed separation from the cut line and give them some margin for error. Whereas a loss, even if it's a loss in quad one to Creighton, they'd be kind of closer to that. Definitely in the last four buys conversation, if not last four in, going into playing back-to-back on the road.
Rocco, who's that team for you?
I think there's a few others as well. Like Texas Tech goes to Hilton again. They'll be underdogs there. But Iowa State, as you saw on the reveal today, is going to be somewhere around 9th overall when you see the actual committee's reveal tomorrow. So if somehow the Red Raiders can win that, build off that big Kansas win they just got on Monday, what a week that would be for them and how high they could climb by Monday with a win there. That'd be significant. Cincinnati, to me, still needs quite a bit more work in terms of not only road, they're good on the road, but they're just 7-9 in meaningful games. So they need to get above 500. Key road game at UCF on Saturday that might be overlooked by many. Really important for their resume. And UCF's been stingy at home, beating a lot of good teams, including Kansas there. You also have Kentucky go into the jungle where nobody, as I covered before, everybody gets demolished down there at Auburn. But if somehow Kentucky hangs with them, they have the athletes to do it, and they get that win, I think the whole complexion of Kentucky can change in one day. So that's pretty huge. And then last but not least, I don't think either of these will happen, but A&M could drastically change their trajectory if they won at Alabama. I don't see it happening, but hey, this is all about opportunities. They got the opportunity. Same thing with Texas going to Houston. Good chance they get demolished by 30. But if somehow Texas uses that rivalry juice to steal a win down there, it changes everything for the Longhorns as well.
Yeah,
one other thing I'll add on the schedule. It's not games to watch, but there's 6 teams in the bubble: Providence, James Madison, Pittsburgh, Grand Canyon, Boise State, and Gonzaga, all playing quad 4 home games this weekend.
There you go. Gotta avoid some landmines there. Wise man once told me it's all about the at bats, and some of these teams have more than others. You know what I'm saying? And you got to maximize them when you get them. Hey, appreciate everybody tuning in on a Friday afternoon for our first reveal of our top 16 teams in the field. Should be a great weekend of college basketball. Some of the order is going to change. Some of it's not. Stick around. We'll update you next week. For Lukas Harkins, for Rocco Miller, I'm John Martin, and we'll catch you next week. Enjoy the games.